Ahoy ahoy, I'm Planet Walk, the host of Flat Earth News, and it surprises me how things can be pretty bad and then somehow manage to keep on getting worse. How does that happen? So today I'm going to start with a pretty serious topic before moving on into the silly stuff. I am of course talking about the protests that have happened in response to the killing of George Floyd. So when it comes to these protests, you've got a lot of people saying a lot of different things. For example, you've got people claiming that the looting was started by the alt-right, and you've got people claiming that the looting was started by Antifa. Now, I'm not going to go ahead and say that either of those two cases are true, because I personally haven't seen any evidence that any of those two cases are true. But it is always possible that the looting is being started by bad faith actors who do want to try and delegitimize the protests. But that is irrelevant because it is possible to condemn the looting while still supporting the protests. And of course, there are also people that will attempt to defend the looting, and that is a lot more nuanced. However, I cannot defend the vandalism of small businesses. No matter what your goal might be, vandalizing small businesses is counterproductive. Now, with all that being said, what the fuck, America? When did you become so authoritarian? Holy shit, some of the videos that I've seen of the police, it's absolutely horrifying. For example, there is this clip here which shows an Australian cameraman getting punched by the police for doing his job. Just a small warning, this next clip does show violence, so skip to here if you don't want to see that.
Yeah, absolutely, guys. We've just had to run about a block as police moved in. We've been fired at with rubber bullets. My cameraman has been hit. We've also seen tear gas being used. Here we go, they're moving through again. This is exactly what it looks like. Exactly what it looks like. We're just standing safely. Oh.
Whoa. Oh.
Amelia, can you hear us?
Amelia, are you okay? Or your cameraman?
So yeah, that happened. And one thing that is very difficult to see in that clip is the cameraman actually got hit twice. First by the shield, and then he got punched. There are other clips from different angles showing that on the internet if you want to go look for them. Now, the apparent reason for police pushing the protesters back was so that Trump could get a photo op. That is Kim Jong-un level shit right there. Now, I could be wrong about that, but that does seem like the most plausible explanation, because shortly after the protesters were cleared out, Trump went to a church and held up a Bible in front of it while getting his picture taken. Now, regardless of whether Trump ordered it or the police are acting of their own volition, it is a very clear violation of power, plain and simple. It's almost like the police response to these protests are kind of proving the point that the protesters are trying to make. That's kind of ironic. Now, one thing that I hear a lot of from flat earthers and anti-SJWs is how much their free speech is being violated. For flat earthers, it's because they're not being recommended on YouTube, apparently that's censorship, and for anti-SJWs, apparently they're being censored by cancel culture. I have a question. Have you ever been arrested after giving a passionate speech? And no, shouting at kids doesn't count as a passionate speech, Nathan Thompson. Well, this guy has.
I am not your enemy. You are not my enemy. We have to share this land no matter what. This is not the best side of everybody here. I would like to see the best side of everybody here. Then you can change the whole perspective of how you view someone. Because of their size. Because of how you see them in different lights. Someone might have a bad day and you say they're a bad person. No, no, no. We all got bad days. We all got bad days. We gotta stop judging people only on our bad days. Because we all have them to some degree. How are you on your good days? Do you want to make a stand? Do you want to make a change? Because if we charge you and you charge us, what is that really doing?
This cannot be illegal.
What is that really doing?
Come on, what are you doing?
What are you doing?
What the f*** do you do?
Are you kidding me?
So apparently there is some context to that. Apparently what happened was the police asked the group to disband, and the group didn't, so they arrested the guy. Don't you guys have, like, the right to protest over in America? And also, why was the black guy arrested and nobody else there arrested? It's almost as if there's a systematic problem with racism in America. Now, since that video's released, the person in that video has been released from custody, but he still got a fine. Now, one thing that these protests have led to, which I'm actually a little bit unsure about, is some police forces are apparently going to be disbanded. Now, this could go one of two ways. It could be great or horrible. Now, the way that it could be great is if they disband the current police force to replace it with something better, like it has been done in the past. However, if the current plan is to disband it and they haven't thought past that, then that's a recipe for disaster. I know that Team Skeptic will be looking at this more in depth, so make sure you go over to his channel if you want to find out more information. Now, one thing I do want to point out is that the problem with how the police are acting towards the protesters is not a problem everywhere. Sure, there are a lot of clips circulating right now with the police acting very shittily towards protesters, and that does need to be addressed. But there are some cases where the police have a dance-off with the protesters.
One city.
Now that is how you handle a protest, with a dance-off.
Now bring it down hard. Someday, put it together.
What are you doing?
Dance off, bro. Me and you.
See, Star-Lord had the right idea. Now, there is one last point that I want to bring up in relation to the protest, and that is the point that people keep on bringing up is, should there actually be protests happening whilst there is a pandemic? Now, this is one of the trickier things to answer, because ideally you would want people to wait until after the pandemic has passed to reduce spread of COVID-19. However, we don't live in an ideal world. If you wait until after the pandemic has passed, then bringing up the killing of George Floyd is like, oh, that was ages ago. Move on. Whereas now it's still fresh in people's minds. But then again, if nothing is done now, then after the pandemic there will probably be another case like George Floyd's, which is also a problem and a reason to protest. So the solution here is probably, if you're going to protest, at least wear a mask. Which brings us nicely onto our next story about a flat earther who refused to wear a mask. So there's a clip that went viral recently and you've probably seen it.
Okay, so I need to talk to a manager because...
I will absolutely humbly go get a manager
Yeah.
for you if you'd like to hang out with me for
Awesome.
just a moment.
That's right. There was a flat earther who wanted to talk to a manager. Why is no one surprised about that? Now, some people may ask, well, how do you know that it's a flat earther? Well, does anyone remember J.M. Truth and his friend Shelley Lewis?
This is Shelley Lewis. I'm at Dana Point, Gelson's.
Now, the reason why she wanted to speak to the manager was because to enter the store you needed to be wearing a mask, and fair enough. And she didn't want to wear a mask. And this is the excuse that she gave.
Hi, I have a medical condition that I'm not allowed to wear a mask, and I'm not required by HIPAA rules and regulations to disclose that.
Bullshit! It's very obvious that she's just making up an excuse so that she can go shopping without having to wear a mask. And it's also pretty obvious that the excuse she gave is complete bullshit, because if there were a condition which affected what you can and can't do and you didn't have to disclose it, then anybody could just say, oh, I have a condition that I don't need to disclose.
Okay, can we shop for you?
So, what does that look like? I have private things I want to get that maybe I don't want you to see.
And it's also pretty obvious here that she's just trying to be difficult. Private items that she doesn't want anyone to see? I mean, what about when you go to the checkout and there's someone there scanning your items? You don't want them to see those items either? Come on, you're just being difficult at this point.
But I can't let you in the store without a mask.
Okay, so where's the regulations that state that?
The regulations?
Yeah.
That is company
Because you're
policy.
discriminating against me now. Do you know that?
Can we enter Shelley in the Oppression Olympics? Because she's trying so hard to come off as, I'm being oppressed. Look, it's company policy that they're not allowed to let anyone in the store unless they have a mask. Policy exists for a reason. An example of a policy like this might be if a recording studio had a policy that they're not allowed to let smelly people inside their recording studios. There is a good reason why they might do that, and that is because in recording studios they have certain materials that might mean that the smell lingers afterwards, so they just don't let smelly people inside. Is that discriminating against people that naturally smell bad? And before anyone tries to say that that's not a real thing, I've actually encountered that exact policy before.
You can call corporate office, but I can't help you.
Okay, well, you guys can get a lawsuit.
I have a feeling that A, she's not going to go for a lawsuit because she knows she's bullshitting, and B, that if she does go for a lawsuit, that she'll lose. But anyway, on to the next story. So, when Elon Musk does some silly stuff like Cybertruck, I can be on board with that because the Cybertruck, I actually like the design of that. However, I can never condone anyone giving their child a silly name. Do not give your kid a stupid name like Northwest or what? So Elon Musk and his partner Grimes have decided to name their kid Ash, apparently the A is Ash, A12. And why? It's not even funny. It's just weird and stupid, and the kid is probably going to get bullied because of it. I get the feeling that Elon Musk is trying too hard to be a meme lord, basically naming his kid like you'd name a SpaceX rocket just for the memes. Just don't do that, okay? And in light of this, I have a special message for anyone with the last name Jarsz, Dover, Kerr, or Hunt. To Mr. Jarsz, do not call your kid Hugh. It's okay if you call yourself Hugh, though. To Mr. Dover, do not call your kid Ben. To Mr. Kerr, do not call your kid Wayne. And to Mr. Hunt, do not call your kid Mike. If you want to make those kinds of jokes, rather than pushing the burden on your kid, change your own name. And for our last story today, it's about Ranty, who has decided to accuse Sleepy Warrior of buying subs. And I've realised something. He was the person that accused Simon Dan of buying subs. So the main point that I want to make here is just because someone is growing a lot faster than usual does not mean that they are buying views or subscribers. They might just be getting more attention that they deserve because you're talking about them, Ranty. So Ranty, if for some reason you're watching this video, a good idea might be to stop giving Sleepy Warrior the attention. I don't like him either. But anyway, that's it for this video. There is a lot that I didn't talk about in relation to the protests, but if I tried to cover it all, there'd be way too much for me to cover, and I'd probably still only cover a quarter of it. But anyway, I will see you in the next video. Between you and me, thank you for watching.
Battalions of riot police with rubber bullet kisses, baton courtesies.